Derek Carr is the rare true free agent of notable quarterbacks in the NFL. And we're going to talk some Dynasty trade negotiation tactics and tips. That and more this week on the Football Guys Dynasty Show. And Jordan, Derek Carr is free. And we were talking about Kirk Cousins, previous iterations of this. Derek Carr gets a jump on NFL free agency in 2023, poised to be a really interesting quarterback class to rock the landscape here for Dynasty and the NFL.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting spot because you're like, there's teams that could contend. Like, there's teams that have good weapons in the perimeter, right? Good receivers, good tight ends. Atlanta and the Jets come to mind of teams that, and there's some talk about Tampa potentially coming to mind. The Saints coming to mind about teams that have good supporting cast that he could just drop right into and potentially be contenders. I don't know if Derek Carr makes you a Super Bowl favorite. I don't know if he makes you a Super Bowl contender. Like, that's probably a bigger philosophical question for the NFL, more so than it is for Dynasty. But I think there's some really good spots. He's going to have the option to pick, which seems really good. I thought there was like zero chance that he'd waive his no trade clause. It made no sense for him to do so. It was just going to be a favor to the Raiders on the way out the door, which made no sense considering it didn't benefit him contractually at all. So this is going to be interesting, and he's going to get the first crack at this. I mean, I think teams will probably wait on Rodgers, but I think that he'll be basically the next big shoe to drop, and the first one really since the Cousins one.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about Derek Carr, the player, because I always assumed as he was going through, he had that early top 10, top 12 season mixed in, and that kind of gave you promise. And then I was thinking back to last summer, and it was, Devontae Adams is there. Oh, Darren Waller's going to be healthy. Hunter Renfrow broke out, I think it was a year or two ago. This is going to be tremendous. Josh Jacobs can catch the ball. And it was like, this could be returning to the MVP season. We didn't see that at all. And he didn't post a top 15 point per game season with Adams, Waller, Renfrow. And so I just kind of think, and I know they weren't healthy for the whole year, but what are the chances, going forward? Because Carr has had 9 seasons, 7 have been in that QB2 zone where super flex, 2 quarterback, yes, you care. Is he changing the game? No. Is there a really big upside there? He's basically a streamer type, a committee guy in a start one. And when you put all that together, that's who he is. He doesn't run. And I think that's one of the bigger things, right? I mean, if you're a non-rushing guy, we say it before, you got to be Brady, Breeze, Stafford in the right situation. These juggernaut passers. Carr is not really that. I love watching him play. But if you, fantasy-wise, you don't add the rushing, and I don't know, like what situation is going to be better than the weapons around him last year with the Raiders?
Not many, right? I mean, that was a good situation, right? And they had Adams again. He didn't get the full crack at it because Waller was hurt, Renfrow was hurt. But yeah, I mean, it's tough to see a lot better spots than that sort of on paper. Maybe in practice he gets a better crack someplace else. I think Atlanta would be really interesting. Like, I think that would be
more so. He probably elevates the weapons, right? I mean, we'd be excited about Pitts and about Drake London with better quarterback play, more consistent. Let's call it a veteran presence of quarterback play, better than Marcus Mariota, let's say. So that's one. Washington has good weapons, but I would still say they're not better across the board than what the Raiders had. And I know they weren't complete for 16, 17 games, as you mentioned, but I just think we have to realize that at this 32-year-old or so juncture of Carr's career that we're probably going to have a zone. Is it 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, somewhere in that prism, no longer, insulated to eternity, and probably not on a lens where we're going to look at him approaching 40 or anything like that. But he has a window here, multiple year window, where we say, QB2 with upside. The nice little moniker that you'll put like on a redraft tag, QB2 with upside type thing. And again, that has value, but I do think we have to kind of soften that all the way to the premium formats. And just, a guy that in a team build per se, you probably want as your QB3. You took a shot maybe on more upside as your QB2. Maybe you have a rookie in your top 2 or 3 spots, and you're like, well, let me bridge that with a Derek Carr. I kind of know what I'm going to get, a more consistent presence there. So I do think that has a function, but I think we have to downshift from the 2022 breakout is coming. We're going to see the best of Derek Carr, because that didn't happen. And I think it's tough to project that it's going to happen going forward.
Yeah. Like, he's one of the guys to me that, as I'm thinking about putting together a draft board, right? Like, Kyler Murray is a name that you have to sort of figure out what you want to do with. And, last year it was Watson was sort of that guy where it was like, if you take Watson, you sort of have to have contingency. You have to have sort of different plans, contingency plans. And could have been Brady last year. It could have been Rodgers, right? You could have gone a couple of different ways in terms of how you wanted to sort of build out that quarterback depth chart. If Watson was your 2, I think Carr sort of fits in that with a, if you want to take a discount this year on Kyler Murray because he's probably going to miss an extended, if not the entire season, Carr sort of can backfill that, right, and sort of keep you afloat if you're doing a startup draft and the rest of your team's strong. Like, I kind of look at him in that lens. Rodgers, if he comes back, would sort of fit that bill as well. Like, I think that's kind of the way that you play him. And then again, the other question is like, what value is just from a roster building, a team building perspective? What teams is he a good quarterback 3 on? If you go 2 elite supermax quarterbacks, Derek Carr's not really a great quarterback 3. You'd rather take a swing
on an upside swing. Yeah.
Yeah. You'd rather take a big upside swing. Right. So that's an interesting, right. It's an interesting philosophical debate, and he's not a quarterback that I have a lot of because he doesn't really fit my philosophical view of how to play Superflex Dynasty, so it's an interesting, like, I like him as a player, but at the same token, he doesn't really do it for me strategically.
Yeah. When I was refocusing my rankings and values going into the offseason, always a good exercise, I started dialing him into a bucket, and ultimately I put him behind Geno Smith, where similar age, but we just saw pretty darn good things out of Geno Smith, upside from Geno Smith. And again, he's probably going to be back in a similar situation with 2 quality wide receivers. And again, I think there's upside there in Seattle, and Geno finding his way. I put him behind Matthew Stafford, where you might say, how many years left in the NFL does Stafford have versus Derek Carr? And then I would counter by saying, if you get one good season out of Stafford, and we've seen far more ceiling from Stafford than Carr, that season it might be worth more than Carr for 5 years from an impact or value over baseline, or whatever kind of number threshold you want to put on that. If you get a QB 6 or 7 season out of Stafford and you get a few seasons of QB 18 out of Carr, I think it's a pretty clear answer which one you'd rather have. So,
yes,
you can fix QB 18 if that falls off your roster or erodes to something else, over the next couple of years. And then the one interesting one for me, and I actually wanted to ask you here, kind of closing on Derek Carr, was Jordan Love. And does Jordan Love fall into a bucket like an incoming rookie, for example, of just, we don't really know, but the what if is enough. Like, I have rookies surrounding Jordan Love is right there in the same grouping as Derek Carr. And like you were saying, from a team build standpoint, as a QB3, would you rather have a Carr, or do you have one of those other options? And lumping Love into it, because he also is a guy that is sparsely played, round 1 pedigree. But if Aaron Rodgers is gone and the probabilities go up, as we get more information here, it's going to be Love's job, Love's keys there for week 1.
Yeah, I think it goes exactly back to the team build perspective, right? Would you rather take a swing at Love, or would you rather take, which might be a double or a home run, but there's a bigger chance you strike out, or would you rather try and just get a single or a walk with Derek Carr, right? That's really the philosophical debate when you're doing that. And I think that matters what the rest of your depth chart looks like, right? Do I want to depend on Jordan Love if I've got Kyler Murray as my quarterback 2? I think I'd probably rather take the Derek Carr shot, right? If I've got Mahomes and Dak Prescott, I'd probably rather take the Jordan Love shot, because my hope there is that I can put that quarterback in a deal for an elite playmaker at another position, right? That's my rationale for having that quarterback. And so I'd rather take the big swing, right? That's sort of the approach there. So I think it's a debate. I thought you were going to say Kenny Pickett. I thought that was going to be the person that you were going to ask, because I would probably.
I'm down on Pickett, so I'm not.
You're down on Pickett. Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay,
so he's a tier below, and I'm just, to me, he's got a long way to go to prove something to me. So, and he's not an overly
quarterback school on him today. I was watching some quarterback
school
on him today. Oh yeah. I was on the bike. I had the bike going. Yeah, lots of tape. It's tape grinding season.
Transitioning, we'll talk a little bit about dynasty trade negotiations, but we got a good question from the chat. What's the fantasy GM equivalent of a darkness retreat? And my first thought to this was, say you didn't have the season that you wanted. You're coming out of it. It's January. Maybe it's now even February, but you just have sort of that sickening feeling in your stomach where you go, I don't even want to look at my rosters. I don't even want to go to my hosting page for my platform. I would say that's the equivalent. You almost go in the dark of, I just want to kind of turn it off and kind of turn it back on when maybe I'm renewing the leagues, whenever things start to wake up, or the NFL combine is going to get my juices flowing again. But I think if you take that, and again, 4 days, not 4 days, but maybe it's more like a few weeks where you start watching the NFL playoffs, you get to the Super Bowl, and now you realize it's been a month and a half and you haven't really checked in on your leagues. I would say that that's kind of the equivalent of a fantasy darkness retreat, because you just like, it's been a long season. I need a break. I need a fresh start, fresh set of eyes. And it's not right now. Like we say it's a 365 thing, but honestly, sometimes you need a little break. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good one. And yeah, just kind of where you're turning on the website, you kind of go like this. You're kind of closing your eyes.
Where you see that email alert, you're just like, delete. Someone's dropping somebody's adjusting their IR, and you're like, I don't care.
Archive.
Darkness.
Yeah.
You just pull it. Dark.
Yeah, it's the dynasty equivalent of a fantasy of a darkness retreat is doing like a house project, right? Like where you're like, all right, I gotta redo the floor and the
my
kitchen.
Evenings and weekend time is not going towards that anymore.
Correct. Yeah,
I'm finishing the basement.
Right, exactly. I gotta install a new bathroom, right? I gotta do that.
Demoing the bathroom, exactly.
Yeah.
I have till Sunday night to finish the bathroom, finally.
How long do you think you could stay in a dark room?
They say it is really not a healthy thing.
I can't imagine that it would be.
It's the equivalent of solitary. Like you think back to Shawshank Redemption, right? I mean, he goes in the hole where he has a little crack where they're like, kid passed, C- average. Like that's the only thing he found out: water and bread, and a C- average for the guy he was tutoring. Yeah, I think they also say, like, even if you're more of a loner or someone that doesn't have a ton of human interaction, let's say, just having some is a lot better health-wise than none. So I think that the darkness, or if you're by yourself, or who knows what restrictions or limitations are on this, but yeah, the darkness, I think. Have you ever, Jordan, been in the dark with your eyes open, where sometimes, if it's not totally dark, your eyes will adjust and you'll start to see stuff and shapes and kind of recognize the room or wherever you are. But if it's truly dark and your eyes are open and not adjusting or seeing anything for more than a few minutes, it kind of tricks your brain. Like all of a sudden, your motor skills and your brain are processing things completely differently. So
I can imagine. I'm not big into meditation, right? I've done a little bit of it. I think it's interesting. I can imagine that if you're in that space, that you would just want to, like, that would be kind of how you would, tolerate that experience, is to do a lot of meditation, right? Do a lot of deep internal thinking, keeping your eyes closed, like those sorts of things. I imagine that that's it. It's probably very good and prompts you with that. I go back to there's a Netflix documentary on the Unabomber, and in it the guy ends up reading. It's about the investigator that investigated the Unabomber, and he's reading through basically all the Unabomber's manifesto, and about all the interaction you have with electricity and all this other stuff. It's kind of out there, but it definitely is out there. But he almost began to believe it, and then he's sitting at the end of the documentary, or the end of the movie, I guess. He's sitting at a light and he can just hear it like buzzing, and it was kind of interesting how it played out. But that's like taking all of that away from you. You know what I mean? You probably don't even realize how much it affects you until you take it all away. It almost was sort of that type of experience for that guy, and I would imagine that's what Rogers is feeling right now.
Yeah, Jay in the chat talking about taking a cave tour, and they warn you, but they turn off all the electricity and it's just pitch black. I think they also the trippy thing is you would lose a sense of your circadian rhythm, right? I mean, we have a natural, it gets light, or we turn the light on, and then it gets dark, and then we know we're up for a few hours, then we go to bed. And if it's just dark all the time, when do you wake up? When do you go to bed? Do you start napping for 2 hours at a time in intervals throughout the quote unquote 24-hour day period? Like it's kind of a wild thing to think of if it's pitch black at all times and you're in, a room or a space like that. All right.
But it's funny because then you're dictating your time, right? Like you are dictating to your time instead of time dictating you. It is, I can understand.
It's light out. I need to be up. It's dark. I need to go to bed. Right.
Correct. Yeah. I can understand why it's productive.
Dynasty trade negotiations, Jordan. In terms of an overarching tip, I would say is the first thing and the biggest thing that I hearken with people is, and getting feedback from some limitations they have, some dynasty weaknesses. I would say one thing is I don't think people in general are very good with constructing counter offers or constructing multiple offers when they send it. So I would say when you're negotiating, thinking in terms of buckets, in terms of not a specific player, or I have to get this first round pick, or I have to get this one tight end, or, limiting yourself in that fashion, I think will also limit your trading opportunities, as opposed to saying something like, I want a cornerstone wide receiver, or I want, an upgrade to my QB2, or I want, like, if you start viewing it in that fashion, I think you're going to be more open to more opportunities, as opposed to, I need to trade for Dak Prescott, or I need to trade for, this one tight end. I think you need to think more broadly, because otherwise you're dealing with one team, one GM, and probably one specific offer you send. And all of a sudden beyond that point, it might be toast already.
Yeah. I mean, I think the easiest way to sort of frame your negotiations is, I think this is the same thing with every dynasty decision that you make, is what are you trying to accomplish? Right before you set out and start sending out trade offers, and when you receive an offer, right? If you're processing what that offer does for you, like what is your aim? What are you trying to do? Does this offer that you received fit what your dynasty strategy is with this particular team? And if it doesn't, right, you probably should say no, right? Or it has to be of such good value that you say yes, right? And you change your strategy. And then if it says, if it does fit your strategy, is it value appropriate, right? That's kind of how I begin each one of these, right? And so I think what you said is exactly right. I'll give you an example. Just this weekend, I had a team that, like, I have tried to, for over a year, that I have tried to trade for an elite quarterback. I have tried every possible option. And I literally had like a half an hour because my daughter was asleep in the car, and I sat down in front of my phone and I said, I'm going to send offers, and I'm going to send them for an elite quarterback. And I went team by team and constructed, kind of like you said, you've talked about this before, where you go, all right, to kind of have the value, like, how do I do 2 or 3 different ways of sending it and saying basically the same thing to the person? And I went through and I just, who were the elite quarterbacks that I was targeting? And I just went through and I kind of varied it by what the value I thought those individual quarterbacks were. And that helped me get a deal done. Now, if I had just gone and said, I want to trade for Dak Prescott because I think he's undervalued, that person said no to the deal, right? And then I'm kind of stuck. But I had a more global overarching thing, which was, I want to acquire an elite quarterback in this league. And that was more helpful. So I think, being kind of having an idea in mind of what it is, and, and then you're trying to trade for players that reflect that profile, as opposed to trading for specific players.
Yeah. I think the other thing, you kind of mentioned it with the, what are you trying to accomplish? I would also say, looking at the time of year as well, is this the time, so saying, what are you trying to accomplish? And then saying, is this the time of year to execute this plan? Because we always talk about how dynasty is ever changing and all this, but it also moves slowly, right? I mean, the next thing, maybe Derek Carr signs, but what's the next thing that's truly going to change values? NFL free agency, moving, shaking that boggle container. And then, we're also going to have the combine that might shape rookie draft values just a little bit, but then it's going to be the NFL draft shifting things. But that's a slow moving thing. I just talked about 3 things over the course of, and really 2.5 over the course of 10 weeks or so. So that's pretty slow moving. The other thing, while you were talking, Jordan, I was thinking is, what do you think about the idea for every team that you have? Now, obviously, if you have a few dozen, it's going to be more taxing than someone that's in 5. And we probably have plenty of listeners that are in a reasonable number. That, what if for each team you write down, you said, what are you trying to accomplish? What if you wrote down 2 or 3 things that it may not be within the scope of from now till week 1? Let's say it might just be more of an overarching, let me look at my team, maybe even talk to somebody about what, kind of a state of the union. But you say, through trading specifically, because that's what we're talking about, but what would I hope to accomplish? And my next 2 or 3 trades, let's say. And it might be, like you just said, acquiring an elite quarterback. It might be, I just need more quality depth at wide receiver. I need, to try to see if I can get a difference maker at tight end. Whatever your things are, and you might have some of those things. So your things might be a little more minor, formats might be different. But even if you wrote down 2 or 3 things, and then guess what? When you get a trade offer, it's the what are you trying to accomplish? Well, how about you just go back to the list? You look at the 2 or 3 things and be like, does this fit any of them? And it doesn't mean you can't make the deal. There might be really good value to be had. And you're like, well, this is just ancillary. This is icing. But I think it's an instructive exercise to saying, what are you actually looking to do? Because it might not be the same for every team.
That's such a good way to do it. Honestly, it's funny you say that after you said the thing about going into the, into the dynasty darkness. That's literally when I pick my teams up. And now, like, I've started to do it with some of them. Now that MFL is rolling over, which is where I play most of my leagues, I'll do it a little bit more in earnest because I'll have all the picks and everything in my spreadsheet. I'll be able to go through and put them in there and everything. I always put in there kind of like what my team goal is, and 3 things that I think could go worse this year, 3 things I think could go better, and 3 ways I'm going to make my team better, right? And that frames my decision making throughout the league, throughout the calendar for that team, right? And so there'll be some teams like that specific team, like front of mind for me was like, I need an elite quarterback in this league. Like that's the first thing I think about when I think of my teams is literally that league and that question, right? But each one of them is different, and each one of them I'll have, some teams like I can't do that with because it's just not, my team's not set up for it, right? My team, I don't have the right assets for it. So they're going to be kind of different types of builds. I'm going to have to try and get away with different types of builds and do some different things in terms of some roster strategies that I'm not typically comfortable doing. But like I sort of will know in that league, like, hey, here's kind of what I'm looking to do in terms of building this out. But I'll have it written down and it'll actually help me, like you said.
Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, episode 141 of the Football Guys Dynasty Show. And want to remind you about the Football Guys 2023 Rookie Draft Guide. You heard about it last week. And this is what you need to gain the edge you need to win. This is where the staff comes together, in-depth stats, rankings, expert film-based analysis, 120 NFL prospects. And the best news, you get this big board, the cheat sheet, Superflex, 1 quarterback. It's 100% free. Sign up over there at footballguys.com/rookie guide. You're going to get the 1.0 version here for free. And if you're elite or Hall of Fame subscriber, those future updates, post-combine, post-NFL draft editions, all the updated information, analysis, draft strategies, athletic scores, etc. You're going to get all of that if you are elite or Hall of Fame subscribers. So head on over to footballguys.com/rookie guide and get that free rookie draft guide and start dominating your dynasty league today.
Chad, we jumping in dynasty trades at this point?
Yeah, let's do it because we've got some monster ones this week. And I found the oracle of dynasty trade discussion, Jordan, because this was a deal. It's hard to imagine, but Patrick Mahomes and Justin Jefferson were traded in the same deal away from a team. There was a team, Jordan, that had Mahomes and Jefferson and dealt them both away in a single swoop. A wind rushes, and all of a sudden, those 2 leaves fall from the tree. Actually, the tree was blown away. It was a hurricane-like condition. So here's what they got, Jordan, and I will ask the new elevated edition of Did They Get Enough? Russell Wilson, A.J. Dillon, Rashad Bateman, 102, 106, 107, 108, and 110. 5 firsts. Russell Wilson, Dillon, and Bateman.
Are you familiar with what a dowry is?
I believe so. That is where you are paid in advance of a wedding in certain culture, right?
Yes, that's what this trade felt like. Okay. You have to give Patrick Mahomes and Justin Jefferson for the right to marry the bride. Okay. Like that's what it felt like. when I was reading this. I mean, it's Mahomes and Jefferson, right? Like, I mean, it's an enormous cost to pay, but those are the two guys that you pay this for. And
You
I look
accrued
at
5
it,
firsts so that you could hopefully build out your team. They built out their team.
yes, you get 5 first because you hope that you can land elite players with them. And you know what you just did? You landed 2 of them. And like that's way better than you're going to do drafting guys from there. And you basically in this deal, like, again, I actually like the players involved, right? I like Russell Wilson. I like AJ Dillon. I'm kind of like half
Neutral.
out on Bateman, but
You
I
did get an
sort
early
of like
first in
those
there,
guys.
so that would be
Yeah.
QB1 off the board, Bijan Robinson,
Yeah.
someone of that ilk, and 4 other firsts. So I'm sure you could do some damage. But the interesting part is always going to be, well, so let's say you trade some of those picks away, or you explore that after the fact. Well, you got them because you traded away Mahomes and Jefferson. So it'd be like, so let's say you traded 106 and 108 for Dak Prescott. Let's just, we can start going down a rabbit hole of how you build out your team. But unless the rosters are deep or the lineups are very deep, I mean, it's about the top end, right? You can figure out everything else if you have Mahomes and Jefferson.
Yes.
That would be the thing. I mean, so yes, if Russell Wilson bounces back in a major way, does that make this a lot easier to do okay on the other side? Absolutely. If you end up with Bijan Robinson at 102 and, he ends up, on a real hot streak, he's considered, an early first round startup pick, just right away, cornerstone guy. Absolutely. That looks good, but it doesn't necessarily mean you win the deal.
Yeah. How many, like, if you were to sort of think about this, how many top half of the position finishes would you need? So top 6 quarterbacks, top 12 running backs, top 12 wide receivers, top 6 tight ends from those picks.
Yeah.
Like, how many double of those are you going to need? I think 2, like, at least, to make that work. And the odds of that happening are really low. Like, I think you might even need 3. Like, you're going to look back at this deal in a couple years and be like, oh man.
Well, and here's the interesting part, because already I'm kind of doing some pick math, and I think we're going to get 4 quarterbacks that probably go in the top 10 of Superflex drafts. So that means you have 5 picks in that zone, and you're going to get looks at 6, 7, 8, 10. Like, you're at least going to get 1 or 2 of those picks with looks at, a top half round 1 NFL drafted quarterback. You may be interested, you may not, but the calculus of, well, I get Russell Wilson. Let's say you get 2 quarterbacks in that zone plus Russell Wilson. And it's like, so what are the expected outcomes of putting all that together versus Mahomes? And I would say you're probably still losing.
Yeah.
2 rookie quarterbacks, non-101s, and Russell Wilson, you're probably losing. And then I would say the other side, where let's say I actually think the other side, you have a better chance. The non-Mahomes part. So let's say you're going to have 2 picks plus 102. Let's say, and then Bateman, Dillon for Jefferson. I think you have a better chance to win that. What do you think?
Yeah. And, because
let's face it, Bijan Robinson could end up being equal to Jefferson.
But it's unlikely he's going to be there. Like, I think he's going to go 1.
Okay.
I think he's going to be a consensus 1. So I think you're going to be dealing with quarterback. Right. If this was 101, I could see it.
Lots of quarterbacks. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, like, great. I've got 3 quarterbacks from this class,
and just probability wise, like 1 to 1.5 are going to end up, to a level where you're like, all right, I got something there. Right. Beyond the sizzle, the actual put in my lineup, feel good about them. How do they look, 2 seasons from now? What trajectory am I on?
Right.
I think, so, but is that going to equal? Are they going to even approach Mahomes? That's the tough part. So again, the Jefferson part, again, I can a little more. Now you start trading Jefferson for like, oh, take 2.5 round 1 wide receivers from this class. We're not telling you who it is, but take 2.5 of them. I don't like that one. I don't like that bet.
I don't. I mean, I would take, like, I would give all 5 of those picks from Mahomes.
Okay.
If I had all 5 of them, the person would take. I would take.
And then the other 3 players for Jefferson, right?
Yeah, okay. And I think Jefferson beats the other 3 players. So
yeah.
And I'm not a huge.
We didn't talk
about
Super Bowl, but he's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
He's pretty good.
Did you see it was Adam Harstead put out a tweet, and it was like, it was in the second half of the game that he had more than 0.8 expected points per dropback, which is
it was nutty.
an astronomical number. Like,
well, like
the
0.2
best,
something is elite, right? I mean, it's something
right?
like
Yeah. Yeah,
Well, his
Jared
one
Goff had like
incompletion or something
0.3 down the
was
stretch of the season, and he was like the
yeah.
best, like by far, of like down this, like the last. I think there was maybe him and one other person was like relatively close, but they smashed the second half of the season at 0.3. Like, I mean, just crazy stuff in that game.
Yeah. All right, next deal. We've got.
Did I say what
big,
my retirement plan is? By the way, how I'm going to fund my retirement.
You're gonna
Anytime
take
Patrick Mahomes is a
Insta-face
live
videos behind,
betting
yeah.
is a live betting underdog, it's just I'm all in. I'm just
You're just gonna bet that.
I get him
Not
plus
a bad
300.
philosophy.
I'm like, I'm all in.
Yeah. Yeah, what was that live line when they were down by 10 points? I wonder.
It was plus. I got him at plus 300.
Plus 300 when they were down 10.
Yes.
Were you sitting there live?
And I was like,
Jordan?
this should be like, and I was like looking at it, and I was like, it's probably like minus 130 if we're being honest. I'm like, guy, just
right.
First
possession
his record
half,
is like 14 and 10 in games that he's been a double digit, that he's trailed by double digits. That's absurd. Like, it's an absurd, just an absurd number. And whenever he gets down by that number, the price is never right. So you just have to, you bet it.
What pass rush is what I would say.
Yeah, right.
What pass rush? It's like they weren't there.
Yeah.
All right,
I saw a T-shirt with it was Jesus with Patrick Mahomes' face on it. I was like, I definitely need that.
Perfect. 12 team, 2 quarterback, shallow rosters. So tight rosters. We got Jalen Waddle on the move. Alec Pierce, Taysom Hill thrown in there, but basically it's Jalen Waddle for Ramondre Stevenson, Jacoby Myers, George Pickens, and 209.
Oh boy, this harkens back to last week. I'm taking a Waddle. I think he's top 3 or 4 wide receiver.
Yeah.
And I think the other guys are everyone else on that side's uncertain, especially Stevenson.
Stevenson risk, Myers free agent. Again, nice story, but the trajectory is not quite as rosy as it was 12 months ago. Pickens, we kind of talked about using him to upgrade if you can. 209 in a 2 quarterback. But yeah, I mean, the fact that you got Alec Pierce thrown in, right? I mean, because you made some reference Pickens versus Pierce, right? Of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not.
There's some similarities there, and it's not a blowout,
absolutely.
right?
Right.
So Stevenson, pretty high risk there, and Waddle pretty insulated. So yeah, I thought this was a good buy there of Waddle there, especially his shallow rosters. Let's not forget to mention that going out the door here. Absolutely. Superflex. I think this is one that you contributed in terms of putting on the show this week. We got CeeDee Lamb for Deontay Johnson, Christian Watson, and 202.
So I'm doing a off-season Dynasty Trades of the Week article. So every week I'll do an article. I usually submit it Wednesday night, it'll be either Thursday or Friday. So, and in my preparation for that, I was looking at this trade. And I instantly had a take on it. And I instantly was like, oh boy. I was like, this is a saucy arbitrage off of CeeDee Lamb. I go, you're giving yourself multiple outs and you're giving yourself pick flexibility. So instantly I went to Dynasty. I went to Twitter, and because I would take the package side of this deal. And so we'll talk about a little bit more, but I instantly went and I polled it. So we'll see. I have the poll results. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I'll be curious to see if we can get your guess on what you think that result is.
I purposely didn't look. So yeah, again.
Okay. You did look, or you did not look?
No, I did not. I would never look. No.
Okay. All right. So here's what I thought.
So I'm not. Oh, okay. So I'm gonna, I'm gonna give my analysis after I predict the poll, right?
Yes.
Okay. So
no, you'll give your analysis. You can give your analysis and then predict the poll, and then I'll tell you what it is. So, so here's my analysis on this one. CeeDee Lamb, I think, is the best player in the deal. When you start looking at some of the numbers, it's probably a lot closer than people will give it credit for. Deontay Johnson, I think, is probably the most mispriced wide receiver at present. He had 141 targets according to PFF this year. I think he had a couple more according to the official statistics. But when you look at him, he's all the way down at 29. Christian Watson's at 25 according to Fantasy Calc. CeeDee Lamb's at wide receiver 3. However, when you start looking at CeeDee Lamb and Deontay Johnson, there's a pretty clear arbitrage case. 148 targets for CeeDee Lamb last year, 141 for Deontay Johnson. Again, what's the lifeblood of wide receiver scoring? It's targets. It's running a lot of routes, getting a lot of targets. In their career, on a per route basis, CeeDee Lamb 0.41 points per route run, 0.38 for Deontay Johnson. So pretty close there in terms of like what they do when they're actually on the field, just their resumes. And then you look at some of the stuff for Deontay Johnson this year. There's 94 wide receivers with 10 or more targets in the red zone. 90 of them had a touchdown. The guys that did not have a touchdown, Khalif Raymond, Scotty Miller, Rondale Moore, and Deontay Johnson. When you actually take it a little bit further out and you start looking at some of the additional stuff, you start looking at guys that had more than 20. So he had 30 red zone targets this year and didn't score a touchdown, which is an astronomical feat. There were 40 guys that actually had 20 targets in the red zone this year. 39 of them had a touchdown. 38 of them had 2 touchdowns. 37 of them had 3 touchdowns. So you are looking at an unbelievably uncommon occurrence. And this is the most target and most receptions that anyone has ever had without scoring a touchdown in a season. So all of that stuff, right? What's the thing that more predicts of the future? Especially when you have a sample of someone. Is it targets? Is it receptions? Or is it scoring? Right? It's definitely the receptions. It's definitely the volume aspect of that. And a lot of the touchdown stuff becomes a little bit fluky. One other stat that I would toss at you to sort of talk about why I think this is a really good arbitrage opportunity. PFF has a metric that they call expected points per game. So it actually will take, all the stuff, put it in a blender and give you kind of what they expect in terms of per game scoring. When you look at it this year, CeeDee Lamb was at wide receiver. He was at wide receiver 9 in per game scoring, expected scoring at 16.2. Deontay Johnson was 17th actually at 14.7. Deontay Johnson scored 4.3 less points. That was 10.4 points per game that he actually had. And CeeDee Lamb had 17.7. So again, he was about 1.5 points over. Deontay Johnson was 4 points under, and that's almost entirely attributable to variance. And so I think when you start looking at those things, the reason why they're so far apart is the variance of what happened this year. I think it's an unbelievable buy low on Deontay Johnson, and add in the fact that you get Christian Watson, who also right there with CeeDee Lamb in terms of points per route run in his career, some elite stuff this year. Again, it's a small sample size, but he has a huge ceiling. His yards per route run, targets per route run, all that stuff is a huge ceiling indicator based off of his rookie season. You're getting pick flexibility, and I don't think you're going to take that much of a hit in the points. And I think you've got multiple ways to potentially beat CeeDee Lamb. I don't think you're probably going to beat him with one player, but you got multiple outs to try and do it. I think it's a clear win on the Deontay Johnson side.
Yeah, I think there are percentage possibilities here that Christian Watson is market valued more than CeeDee Lamb, by midseason, things occurring, because CeeDee Lamb had a pretty clear run. Like I always kind of look at where's the tide going, because CeeDee Lamb competition for targets, right? I mean, Dalton Schultz missed some time. Michael Gallup was not himself. They're going to look to upgrade. They're going to look to add to wide receiver. Noah Brown, nice story, pats him on the head. It was CeeDee Lamb and not much else. And we look, what did he do? Well, he was wide receiver. What was it? Wide receiver 8 in adjusted points per game. So he didn't even get all the way. And you say, had a good quarterback and didn't have a lot around him, and he still didn't truly dominate and eat. And so it's probably going to get worse. Deontay Johnson, you already mentioned it, 0 touchdowns. It's Deontay Johnson's season this offseason. Like when I saw how he finished and how people are going to look at that and remember him, and the fact that that's going to tarnish a soon-to-be 27-year-old, where he's already at an age where if you haven't hit monster ceiling or if you had a down year, it's going to affect you. It's going to sag you down. And so Deontay Johnson is one of those buys. Like he's in my top 25 still, and I think not many people would have him there. So yeah, I think that spread, I was just looking at, I didn't even add in 202, but it's about like plus 45% in my trade calculator for just the Watson and Deontay Johnson over CeeDee Lamb. Now, you generally, with the best player premium, and you say CeeDee Lamb gets it, you want to sell for, trying to get at least 25, 30%. But when you're over 40%, you're adding 202, which Superflex, I just mentioned a segment ago, we're looking at, 4 quarterbacks there probably populating the top 10. So if you subtract that out, you are looking at like a 1 quarterback top 10 pick at 202. So I think you put all that together. And again, I think the pick is gravy. I think you have the solidity of Deontay Johnson. You've got the upside perk and surge potential of Christian Watson. You put that together, and this is, I think, the way to make a two-way go sell of a player with the best player in the deal in CeeDee Lamb. Like, I think this is actually a proper way to do it. You get an older guy, and again, Diontae Johnson's not old, but you get a veteran player, you get a younger guy who actually showed something in year one, and then you get a pick. I mean, you got 3 ways to make it happen. You probably only need a combination of 2 of those things, of Diontae Johnson scoring a few more touchdowns, Christian Watson, elevates just a little bit from what he did last year. And if 202 helps build depth, if that's a day 2 running back, whatever, I think you put that together, and it's a pretty easy story to win that deal. And I think you still win that side, even if those things don't happen, if CeeDee Lamb merely takes a step back because there's more competition. What if they do add a playmaker on offense, a legit playmaker that steals it away? Because CeeDee Lamb, to me, is not a true alpha. He's very good, but I just don't think he's an offensive passing game tilter. And going through, like, I have him running the comps, the future cast, 50% odds of a top 12 season going forward. Most people would guess that's low. I would get, and there are players that are up in the 70s, 80s, even 100%. Guys like Jefferson, Chase, I mean, they're just on a ridiculous track that it'd be a shocker if they didn't. But CeeDee Lamb is not one of those guys. He just falls into that zone of wide receiver 5 through whatever, that you say, yeah, a lot of these guys are 50-50 bets in the future to put up one top 12 season. And that's kind of where we stand with CeeDee Lamb. So I really like this as a sell. Now, the poll, I will guess 68% on the CeeDee Lamb side.
You're incredibly in tune, almost to the point of I don't believe that you didn't look. You're incredibly in tune with the polls.
I was going to go slightly lower than 68. Is it 66?
It's 66.1% on the Lamb side.
Jordan, we all have our roles. You are the John Stockton, and you pass it to the Karl Malone, and I'm going to shove it through. That's what our roles are. You put the Twitter poll out. I don't look. You don't believe me, but I guess pretty close. Because I know what the market thinks. They love CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah. I pulled some AOD subscribers today, and it was like 85% of them took the package side, and I was like, I go, that's when like that's what I think the value of like a true statistical analysis is, because you look at that and you're like, okay, there's a clear arbitrage here. There's multiple ways out. Like, you've got multiple ways to win this deal on the other side, and you have to look at the probability that Lamb actually beats you. Right. It's what you call it the burn factor, which is the total right thing. How does he burn you to the point that you make it like that he makes it so you can't win the deal?
Well, if he continues
the only
to elevate,
real way to do that at wide receiver is to finish as wide receiver 1.
He's got to
finish wide receiver 1. Yeah.
Or just in that top bucket, whatever that is. Right. I mean, averaging 20 points per game, something like that.
Right.
And frankly, this is going to be a very telling season to see if he does that. Right. I mean, upward trajectory so far, and Dallas is going to do something. So this is going to be the year to see. And I really think last year was the actual let's see, because he didn't make it happen. And I think that was a pretty good litmus test. So that's on me. That's me. I think a lot of people think it's this year. I think it was last year. And that's also a dividing point on how you view this deal, where you think that Lamb is in that trajectory. And I also think Christian Watson, whether it's Rodgers, it probably isn't, or Jordan Love, I think Watson's going to do, like, I also have one more, I will say one more data point where I have the Y+1 uptick percentage, which basically looks at where you finished last year and just what are the odds that you're better this year. So I didn't even pose that, but that's on my dynasty ranking. So Christian Watson has a 65%, which is really good. A lot of these veterans or a lot of these guys that have finished well, I mean, they're below 25, 30%. And you expect that. And Watson, again, he was, wide receiver 37. So he has a 65% chance to beat that. Now, CeeDee Lamb, he finished at wide receiver 8, so that's a higher bar, but 27% chance. So again, him taking a step forward to being a top half wide receiver 1, 75% chance he's not, is kind of the take there. And what we just said, right? That's kind of the one thing that would beat you, right? Turning elite. And you even put it all the way at wide receiver 1 overall. So yeah, you have a lot of ways to win. So love that deal. All right. Next one, last one we got here is FFPC, super flex, super shallow. And I think we had something from the chat that was also a Justin Fields type trade, but this is the one we're going to discuss this week. We got FFPC, super flex, 101, 110, 112 for Justin Fields and 106.
It's so interesting about what you think of Fields, right? I mean, because this is a first round startup pick, if you believe that, right? I mean, Fields is a first round startup pick right now if you were to re-rack him. I can't do that, right? I can't do that. So I think it becomes a little bit of a question of like, how do you want to pivot off of that, right? Is the question. To me, the way you use Fields is to go up, right? You don't go down, right? You don't, when you get a quarterback that you don't believe in, that's a first round startup pick, you don't divest that. You go up, you add to that, right? You add 106 in Fields and get Allen or Mahomes, or like that should be your starting point of where you think. I don't know if that gets done, but you start adding things to it, right? That's the direction that you move. I don't love the move the other way. Even though I sort of like the idea of a pivot, right? Going from Fields down to 101, right?
Well, you say going down to 101 in FFPC, where we know it's a small roster. Bijan Robinson would go really high, right? I mean, if you were racking a startup,
he's going to go behind Fields.
I don't know. I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that separated. I'll say that.
Interesting. Okay.
If we get FFPC right now, if we had 10 drafts going on of this exact format, I think Fields would. I mean, because we saw the Football Guys staff mock draft. I believe Fields went 107 as QB. I think it was 7 straight quarterbacks, something like that. So he was like 7 or so. Let's say 7, 8, something like that. And Bijan Robinson went 201 or 112, somewhere in that zone. So that's not a big spread. And I honestly think FFPC, shallow rosters, we know, stud running back or stud, wide receiver running back, you can't roster very many quarterbacks. So I think the spread would be tighter than that, honestly. I think Bijan Robinson might be top 10 or 101, excuse me. So I think it's pretty tight. So I think that's more lateral. I find it fascinating that 106 is in the steal. Don't you? Like that was the interesting twist to me. It's 106, not like a future second, not like 205. The fact that you're giving a mid first with Fields was the part that got me.
Yeah, because you think like, all right, because that's how I viewed it, right? 110 and 112 equals 106 was kind of how I had it in my mind, right? Okay. It's not exactly, but that's kind of how I viewed it. And then it's 101 versus Fields.
Yeah.
And that feels like a lateral to downgrade to me. So that was kind of why I viewed it that way. So if you're in the business of wanting to trade 106 and Fields, I understand why you do this deal. Have you exhausted all other options?
You'd rather try to get Herbert or Allen or Mahomes or
right. Because I don't think that is that far away. Right. I mean, if you traded 108 in a first, like that gets you 101 or 102 in a lot of leagues. Again, maybe if it's not, maybe people think it's better than 106, but that's what people think of as a random future first. I mean, I don't think it's that far. Again, I wouldn't do the deal, right? I wouldn't trade Fields or Mahomes or Allen for that, but I think people would. I don't know. I would shoot that direction before I went this one. I get it, but I would go up rather than go sideways.
Is Justin Fields fantasy wise the most high variance outcome player from now until, let's say, the end of the season or something?
He's Jalen Hurts with negative passing trajectory, right?
No, but doesn't he, like what I meant by that though is I was going to ask what your percentage chance is that the Bears, whether it's at 1 or what if they traded down, but that they draft a quarterback in the top half of round 1 this year. It's non-zero, first of all. And so a quarterback, a first round startup quarterback that has that within their outcomes of like, we don't know. Like that's frightening. That's a frightening floor. But also, again, I'm a little bit of an apologist. I will say this. Get the guy some help because it's a brutal situation. Chase Claypool was like your big game-changing idea of like, let's help him. And he was a figment of their imagination pretty much since he got with the Bears. Like, was he there? Did he exist? I'm not sure. And beyond that, you've got N'Keal Harry was on that team. I don't know if unless you're a degenerate or you're a Bears fan, I don't know if you acknowledge that. N'Keal Harry was a relevant part of their passing game. Cole Kmet has been okay. It's like, this is what he's dealing with. Darnell Mooney turned into, being on the back of a milk carton. Like, he was sort of promising, that's a nice, cute day 3 story. And he just turned into a day 3 story. Like, it was wild. And again, is that Justin Fields causing that? Or is that saying he had the worst weapons in football and he was a developing young quarterback that frankly needs a lot more help, and he gets it this offseason? I just find Justin Fields and the Bears just in general fascinating. So I mean, could he be a baby Jalen Hurts when we get and he's like, again, he could be a top 3 or 4 fantasy quarterback and we're still like, I don't think he's any good. That's absolutely possible. Let's call that like you're quote unquote winning on the scoreboard, but long term, like proving it to somebody or whatever, you're still not proving it. And then you have they draft someone. So I guess that means something. And then you have he actually improves passing wise and he's on a completely different plane 12 months from now. All those are in play. Those 3 things are coexisting all at the same time. So I don't know where to go with this, Jordan, because he was breaking rushing records. That is highly appealing from a fantasy standpoint. So anyway,
but he's at the top of the stuff that you can't depend on long term, and the bottom of the stuff that you need to depend on long term.
Oh, I know. His time to pass, it's frightening.
It's horrific.
It's frightening. Like from a processing. Yes. Now, Jordan, let me ask you though, if you're throwing to N'Keal Harry and Chase Claypool and falling off the edge of the boat, Darnell Mooney, you might hold the ball an extra half second too.
Listen, none of those guys are going to separate, so you might as well throw it early. Right? That's
true. Chase Claypool, go balls. Right? If he has 1-on-1, I'm throwing it.
They extended Equanimeous St. Brown.
I did forget the notable. Thank you. That was a notable addition to this conversation.
Hey, maybe if that means they can kidnap his brother, that's a useful contract addition. Like maybe that's what they're going for.
Anyway, but do you think we'll know with the moves of not going quarterback, what they do around him? Could that get you more on board with Fields by May? A notable signing, a drafting of a prospect. Not really.
I mean, not with the guys that are going to go after him or around him in startup drafts. If you told me, hey, Jordan, you could take him as quarterback 8 or 9 and redraft, I'm interested in that. If you want to say like, hey, Jordan, you can take him 8 or 9 in Dynasty, I want no part of that. None. Okay. Because the risk is way too high up there.
Okay. But you're comparing it to the others that are going around him, correct?
Yes. There's guys going after him that are much safer bets.
Okay. But if they weren't there, okay. It sounds like I'm a little more
safe. I need to see him be a better passer. I need to see it. Okay. So the answer to your question is probably not.
All right. So it sounds like if we were putting this together, for the record, I'm below the market on him, but it sounds like I'm a little ahead of you. If I were to cross check this.
Yes.
I have him about 10. I'm about 10. But there's I'm still looking at this. I mean, there's still 2 notable quarterbacks that are probably going around after him it's just a no-brainer. So
absolutely.
From an action planning standpoint, I still wouldn't draft him. That said, I think there's massive upside.
Well, and then you get to the point of like, all right, how low could you conceivably put him, and you can't go past like 11. like you can't go any further than that. Like that's 10 is almost as low as you could go with him. I haven't looked, but like
that's a good call out. You're like, hey Chad, you want to pretend like you're being all, like, hey, I'm being really conservative, and you're like, well, you can't go that low. I mean,
right. I mean, I think the lowest you could put him is probably 11. Right. I don't think you can put Tua over him, and I would put Watson and Prescott ahead of him. So I mean, so is there a point where I draft him? Yeah. Is he ever going to be available there? Probably not.
Right. All right. We are going to the quotes from the Football Guys Dynasty Forum this week.
Hey, can I throw in my read real quick?
Yes.
I think I missed you earlier. All right. So,
I thought that was the section. Go ahead.
That's all right. We botched. So my annual AOD team building guide is out. You can use promo code FBG at analyticsdynasty.com/store. It'll get you 10% off. And Football Guys will know too. So that way you'll, help the show in terms of getting us some potentially more content and all of those good fun things. I got key metrics. Again, a lot of stuff that we used in this discussion is in that book, talking about team building, some different strategies, sort of how trades like that CeeDee Lamb one play out. We've got a lot of stuff in there for that. And I've got a one-page chart that has all the stuff in there. Again, a lot of the stuff that we were talking about in the trade discussion, it's right on there. So I could go on there and kind of look, hey, here are my trade rules when I'm thinking about trades and doing all that stuff. It's basically the Dynasty to-do guide, right? It's the Dynasty to-do draft guide, rookie pick guide, startups, trades. It's got it all there for you. So go ahead, analyticsdynasty.com/store, 10% off the team building guide, and I'll put the specific link in the show notes for you as well.
Excellent. Yep. Save time. You need Cliff Notes. You need it faster because you want to get to trading and team building. And again, the research should be done and saving you time elsewhere. Quotes from the Footballguys Dynasty Forum this week. Got a couple of them. And I actually wanted a little bit of your legal opinion here, Jordan. I haven't seen a lot in the Footballguys staff chatter. Got some lawyers in there, yourself included, on Joe Mixon. And so I wanted to kind of spark that because someone said they sold Mixon to move up from 210 to 108. It's a one quarterback and it's a running back crazy league, they say. So getting up there to the later first. What are your spidey senses saying about Joe Mixon of late? Because he's on the naughty list there legally.
Yeah, that's weird. I haven't read the full stuff about it, but he was, there's a arrest warrant for him, and then it got dismissed. I'm not exactly sure. I thought independent of, like, if Joe Mixon spent his entire offseason at church, I thought that there was still a good chance that he was going to get cut because contractually it doesn't make a ton of sense for them to pay him what they have to pay him with this level of production. So I kind of view him on the kind of the 1 year trajectory of running backs. So, I'm not too sure what you're going to get in the mid first round. But as a package him up and sort of move him from that range, like I think that does make a lot of sense at this point in the offseason, almost independent of his legal issues.
Yeah, not specifically from maybe what you're going to get rookie-wise at 108, but what I like is 108 gets you flexible. It can certainly get you an auto-start wide receiver. I almost wonder, I'm kind of looking at my rankings here. I mean, it might give you pathways. 108 can give you pathways to maybe getting Josh Jacobs, maybe getting Austin Eckler. Just even if you're not really thinking running back, those are just thought-provoking ideas that it might end up being an upgrade for you just because it gets you into a flexible asset. And now that flexible asset can 108 could move you up in the rookie draft where Joe Mixon might not. And I would also say, I mean, Mixon is all, you mentioned a cuttable contract. I kind of look at years of allegiance. I put him at 0.5 because, he's under contract this year, but he might not be. It was kind of how that looks. So it's not a guarantee. And 27 years old. And I've always said, like, he's someone that's not really elevating above his situation, too often. He's not breaking big runs that are intrinsically because of his own. He's kind of getting what's blocked. The 20 plus yard runs are few and far between. So for Mixon at 27, I mean, henny penny, the sky's falling. And I think he's going to be one that, 1 year and go in terms of how we sort of keep reassessing, but that price is going to keep falling. And I honestly go back, is he going to be a difference maker? Is he going to be a 27-year-old Austin Eckler, providing impact? And it doesn't seem like he has that combination of elite receiving upside. If he's on the move, he frankly wasn't elite on the Bengals. So I don't know where we're going with this. So I do think getting flexible, even though I think the value is fine here, on both sides, I just think, giving him up, it's running back crazy, which they said. I just think in general, 108 is going to give you a lot more options than Mixon.
Absolutely.
And you get out of that business, right? Of just like, what's going to happen? Suspension. What if he is, even if he's still on the team, but this kind of definitely does raise some red, pink, chartreuse, whatever it is, flags to what's going on with him. Last one.
And
here.
liquidity is your friend at this point in the offseason. Right. That's good.
Yeah. It's funny. If you look at this thread from last year, everybody was so high on DeAndre Swift and Gabe Davis.
How history can echo. It doesn't repeat itself, but it can sure sound very similar.
I started looking back with DeAndre Swift, and I was like, was he ever really a workhorse? And his let's see, first two NFL seasons, so before 2022 happened, 8.8 carries per game, 11.6 carries per game. And if you want to say he's Alvin Kamara, and he was gonna, let's have him 10 to 12 carries, 6 receptions a game, it's a high bar, first of all, to achieve. Eckler, we've had a few running backs, including Kamara, kind of achieve that true dual threat where it's like, catch the ball. Like, we want you to be involved in the passing game. The rushing is nice. It's okay. And then in college, though, DeAndre Swift, 5.4 rushes per game, 11.6, and then 14. Generally, and I know he's with Georgia, and they have a bunch of good backs or whatever, but in general, I bet the peak season you see for running backs that go that highly in the draft, more than 14 and then 11 were their top 2 seasons in college. Either a bigger peak, bigger top season, or just more workhorse type usage is what I would say. So one overarching thing is we shouldn't be surprised that 3 years in college, now 3 years in the NFL, he was at 7.1 carries per game this past year in a big committee. You're kind of expecting something different than what we've seen for year over year, correct? I mean, we're expecting something different. This is the whole definition of insanity.
I think the biggest positive that you could take is the running back coach Deuce Staley has left Detroit and gone to Carolina. So if there's a beef there, and Jamal Williams is a free agent, right? Who knows? Maybe he follows to Carolina. I don't know. I'm just speculating, but maybe that's what was holding him back. I don't know. I don't like the whole blame the coach. I don't like the whole blame everyone because they're an idiot approach to explaining poor player performance.
Assume rational coaching, right? We say that.
Well, there are some coaches that don't do smart things, but you just can't blame. Don't get me on the blame the refs and all that rant. But not everyone is an idiot. And so when someone acts in a way, I assume that they're doing it because they're informed and they spend 100+ hours a week preparing to do their job. And he probably has access to a lot more information than we do about why DeAndre Swift isn't playing. And that should probably be reflected in his dynasty cost.
Yeah. I mean, he's still in the top 10 to 15.
Yeah.
I mean,
how about him for Deontay Johnson in a first? Like, let's start crafting some fun trades.
Quality years remaining for those two players stacking up. Right. I think part of it is, especially in a startup draft, I mean, there's so many people that go into it and they're like, I got to build my lineup. It's amazing when you look at through 6, 7, 8 rounds and what % of teams are so close to having their lineup complete. Because the lineup is next week or week 1 is the most important thing to them. And like some of my best startups, I don't even have a running back by round 8 or something like that. And it's okay. And I think you're going to get to, and that's why you see guys like, oh, you get to a certain point. It's like, I got to draft Javonte Williams. I got to draft DeAndre Swift. I got to draft Joe Mixon. I got to, make myself whole. I got to look and see 2 starting running backs NFL wise, which it's ironic, that I included 2 or 3 of those guys when you're talking NFL starting running backs, because they may not be. Right. They might not be. Sorry to say. So there's just some sort of gravitational pull when you see a lot of people do a startup draft where it's like they have to have a certain combination of positions, and it's amazing how close it is to the starting lineup through the top 100 or something.
It's crazy how that goes.
Yep. So Swift, I mean, if there ever were a critical season, this is the one. This is the season. It's almost like Justin Fields over the next 4 months. See how things go. Seeing how things go. We need to hear the right things. All right. That is going to do it this week. In this episode, we discussed a variety of topics. What off season? Dynasty show? No off season. We got Derek Carr. We got dynasty trade negotiation tips. We talked about DeAndre Swift and a ton of trades between CeeDee Lamb, Justin Fields, Jalen Waddle, Patrick Mahomes, the massive deal that started it all in that section with Justin Jefferson also mixed in. I'm Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your dynasty leagues.